Deep in the misty hills of West Virginia, the ghosts of a forgotten mining town still wander. Their lanterns flicker with the memories of the town that wasn't anymore. Now, their stories awaken once more.
Good evening, night owls and ghost hunters. It's Felix Lubezki here on SL Tonight, broadcasting from the heart of Iowa with another dose of atmospheric dread. Before we begin, as usual, we have a sponsor. Let's see what we got tonight.
Mirror, mirror in my hand, who is the fairest in the land? See the real you, perfect beauty awaits. Come inside. We are waiting. Join us. Magic mirror compact. Beauty that pulls you in.
Wow. Well, I won't be looking in the mirror anytime soon. Yikes. Anyway, moving on. From C. Robert Cargill's masterful collection, We Are Where the Nightmares Go and Other Stories, we're exploring The Town That Wasn't Anymore. Set in a fading West Virginia mining town scarred by a tragic disaster, the slow burn ghost story follows locals battling angry spirits that refuse to rest. Haunting, regret-filled, and full of eerie small-town vibes. Think modern horror with supernatural punch. No spoilers ahead. Step into the shadows. Wilton Jacobs was a good sheriff. He had to be. Though Pine Hall Bluff was a sleepy, quiet little town, it required a certain amount of finesse to keep straight. A quality Wilton had acquired watching his father, Michael, the previous sheriff, keep the peace. He was an unassuming man, and you wouldn't think much to look at him outside of his uniform. Stonk, pasty, a wee Caroline eroding his widow's peak a little each day. But when he put on that star and hat, you could see it in his eyes. A determination, an unflappability. He never lost his temper, never let anyone get the better of him. And if somehow you did manage to elicit a glare from him, he didn't have to say a goddamn word. His eyes did all the talking. I'm not moving from this spot, they'd say. You are. Pine Hall Bluff was an old mining town nestled high up in the mountains of West Virginia. Surrounded on all sides by trees as far as the eye could see. Deep and otherwise undeveloped country that had seen its fair share of tragedy and death. The roads were mostly dirt and gravel, with only a handful of paved ones, all meant for hauling ore, each winding around through hills peppered with shacks and cheap mid-century company houses. The local mine had been closed for years, not for lack of coal, but for the death of some 227 miners. It had claimed in a collapse that broke the back of the town and sunk Colson Coal, the company that owned it, into bankruptcy. There were few living in Pine Hall Bluff that didn't have kin down that mine, and fewer still that didn't lose someone in the subsequent chaos. But that was all a long time ago. Michael had been sheriff then, and Wilton just a deputy still wet behind the ears. Most people up and left after that, said they couldn't abide living in a town cursed like it was, but those that stayed carved out what life they could. The town had started with a population of around 3,500. Now there were only a few dozen souls left. Wilton sat in his truck at the top of Old Miller's Hill, sucking at the end of a filterless Pall Mall, ashing out the driver's side window, looking down into the valley as the sun crept closer and closer to the edge of the world. Sometimes he daydreamed that the mountains were teeth, and one night they might snap shut, the mouth of the world swallowing whole the town and the valley and all the shit that came with it. But he was never that lucky. The maw of the world gaped wide into the heavens, leaving everything just where it was. Every day the sun rose and the town was still there, the burden his father had left to him. a responsibility he couldn't bear to abandon. It was a town in name only, a smudge on the map that led to nowhere at all, and he was the law, what little that still meant out here. With each passing moment, the sun sank closer to the horizon, and with it Wilton's heart into his stomach. He hated sunset. The days in Pine Hall Bluff were quiet, easy, peaceful. It was the nights that were trouble. There were a different kind of quiet, a nervous quiet, a dead quiet. The kind where even the forest shut up lest it disturb the dead. The truck's police radio crackled to life, a burst of garbled static like a cough drowning out distant whispers. Wilton picked up the handset and pressed the button. Go for Jacobs. There was no response. He stared at the radio, waiting to see if there was another burst, turning up the volume a bit to see if there was anything behind the low hiss of the open channel. Go for Jacobs. Nothing. It looked like it was going to be a quiet night. He stabbed out the butt of his cigarette in the ashtray before turning the key in the ignition. It was time to make the rounds. Twilight was only going to last so long. Father Jeremy Paddock hadn't always wanted to be a priest. The son of a North Atlantic fisherman, he spent his youth on trawlers drenched in frozen mist, the cold seeping in so deep it made his bones brittle. But when a long line went the wrong way, taking 3 fingers of his left hand with it, he was saddled with the choice between working below decks in the freezer or finding something else to do. He always told people that at the end of the day he was happy he'd at least lost half a hand because it was what brought him to God, that he was the very model of the Lord working in mysterious ways. But as he sat alone in the dark of the night in that hospital staring at half a hand, he started to ask God why, and God whispered back. He had a calling, and it took tragedy to find it. But now that he'd stood before his Maker, stared him in the eye, and saw the breadths of his creation, Father Paddock would much rather have had his hand back. He stood in the back of the church, lighting candles that flickered weakly against the encroaching dark. Originally meant to be a dual-purpose church serving both Catholic and Protestant services, it was an odd building, very mid-century with sharp corners, aerodynamic flourishes, and a pulley and chain up front that could swap a crucifix for a standard Christless cross. But that pulley hadn't been pulled in years, not since the Lutheran pastor passed on and lacking much of a flock anyway, was never replaced. Paddock himself had repeatedly asked for a transfer from his bishop, but every time he did, the answer came back, no, you're needed there. He needed a sabbatical. He needed a new flock. He needed something other than a church in a dead town with a 7-member congregation, only 3 of whom ever bothered to attend Mass. Like everyone else, he hated Pine Hall Bluff. He just couldn't leave it. Sheriff, he said without looking up. He shuffled to the side, lighting another row of candles. Padre, said Wilton, standing in the doorway, hat in hand. You can come in, you know. Doesn't feel right. What with me not being baptized and all. It's a non-denominational church, Wilt. Colson's Cole built it, not the parish, not God. You know that. Yeah, but you blessed it and all. I can baptize you, you know, if that'll make a difference. Yeah, but then I gotta take all them classes and you don't hold them anymore. I'll make an exception, said the priest, turning around. You don't need the classes. I'm not sure God will be alright with me skipping ahead of the line like that. I'm not sure God cares much about any of that anyhow. To be honest, I'm beginning to think he doesn't care about much of anything at all. The sheriff nodded, understanding. Funny how the same bad thing can flip 2 people like us in completely different directions. Maybe there's no way to survive something like that without questioning everything. And maybe it's just this fucking town, said the priest. Maybe it just exists to destroy everything it surveys. Maybe it was just hollow us out until we're nothing. Like we're the day everyone went down in that mine and never back up. Maybe. So how are you feeling about tonight? Pretty good. I feel like it's going to be quiet. Sure? I'm sure it feels that way. Why, you got a bad feeling or something? Not as such, but I don't have a good feeling about it either. Wilton sighed. I'd sure feel a lot better about tonight if we had a consensus. A consensus never really been a sure thing. No, I reckon it hasn't. Would you like to pray about it? Wilton looked around the church, still not having taken a step in past the doorway. No, I'll say my words in the truck. But, Padre? Yeah? I could really use you believing again. Like proper believing, just in case. Yeah, said Father Paddock. I'll put in a word with the big man and see what I can do. You do that. Jess Bish wasn't Irish, but he figured the Irish weren't as likely to drink in a Pollack bar as the Polish were to drink in a Vic one. By the time he figured out that no one in town actually cared, the name Murphy had stuck. Not that the bar was particularly Irish, or particularly anything for that matter, but it sounded better than Bish's. Murphy's wasn't so much a bar as it was a gas station that had its convenience store gutted and replaced by something that approximated one. There were a wobbly lacquer tables scattered about, and the wall behind the bar was nothing more than a series of mismatched glass-fronted mini fridges stuffed full of 4 different brands of beer, only 3 of which ever needed to be replenished regularly. Above those ran a shelf holding whiskeys, a handful of vodkas, and a collection of leftover schnapps that no one quite had the stomach to drink. The bar top, though, was finely crafted, hand-built, and stained one weekend by a pair of regulars who were tired of drinking at a place less comfortable than their own porches. The pumps outside still functioned, although they didn't need to be refueled nearly as often as they used to. The credit card readers didn't work anymore, but they didn't need to. Everyone paid by cash these days. Out front between the pumps and the bar was a hand-painted sign reading, "Gas up while you wait." People used to find that funny. There were only 2 types of people left in Pine Hall Bluff: landowners who were too poor to move elsewhere, and people who felt there was still a job to do in town. Both types drank at Murphy's. By the time the sun was setting, Murphy's was almost as hopping as it got on a weeknight. Will Riley, an old machinist best known for his thick, bushy mustache and his fondness for older whiskeys, only 15 years or older for Will, sat at the bar with his best friend, Stephen Hill. Mullet-coiffed truck driver who still made his home here was that best friend. And in the corner sat Rocky Martinez, one of 4 local rent-a-cops hired to look after the several $1 million worth of mining equipment that had been picked up at an auction, but had yet to be moved elsewhere. Sometimes the Murphys might see as many as 6 or even 7 people at once, but that was usually Saturdays or sunup after a particularly rough night. "Wait," said the Stash. "I still don't get it." "What's not to get?" asked the Mullet. Stash pointed at his glass. "How the hell is this both whiskey and not whiskey? I'm looking at it. It's fucking whiskey." "Yeah, but for a thing to exist, it also has to not exist." "That doesn't make any sense." "Sure it does. Look, in order for something to be hot, there must be also cold. In order for something to get wet, there must also be a state we call dry. And in order for there to be light, there has to be dark. Everything has an opposite, 2 states of being, existing and not existing." "Right. And in order for there to be whiskey, there also has to be a state of it being not whiskey." "Yeah," said the Stash. "But that's whiskey." "That right there?" "Yeah." Mullet grabbed Stash's shot glass and swallowed the contents whole. He slammed the glass on the countertop in victory, asking loudly, "Then what the fuck is that?" "An empty glass." "But is it whiskey?" "That's not fucking whiskey." "Exactly," he said, pointing at the Stash. "But it still exists. It's just in your goddamn belly." "Being turned into something else," said the Mullet. "It won't be whiskey for long. It no longer exists." "But it did. So, was it whiskey?" "It was. But it won't be soon." "No. So it can be both," said the Mullet. "It just matters at what point in time you're viewing it." "This is seriously the shit you listen to in your truck?" asked the Stash. "Sure. Those halls are long and there are only so many audiobooks. I mean, once you've gotten through all the Koontz and King, what's left but Jean-Paul Sartre? Wasn't he the one who said God was dead?" "Nah," said the rent-a-cop. "That was Nietzsche. He was the German who died of syphilis. Sartre was the Frenchman who turned down the Nobel Prize." The bartender, the Stash, and the Mullet all turned to look at the rent-a-cop. "What?" asked the rent-a-cop. "He's the only one who can listen to audiobooks." The door opened, jangling, interrupting the conversation. The sheriff strode in, hat in hand. "Sheriff," said everyone. "Everyone," said the sheriff. "He in yet?" "Nope," said the bartender. "Not yet. A little late in the day, don't you think? Didn't get a lot of sleep last night on account of last week. It's pretty rough on him. Can I get you a drink?" "Soda with lime." "How much vodka?" "I'm on duty." "It's only 1 shot then." "Yeah. I reckon just the one." He sat down at the last open stool at the bar. "So what are we talking about tonight?" Will Riley chewed on his mustache for a moment before pointing at his empty glass. How is this supposed to be whiskey? Sheriff peered over. That doesn't look like whiskey. That's what I'm saying. We're talking Sartare, said the mullet. Oh, then it's both. God damn it, said the stash, banging his head on the counter. You know what Sartare said hell was, right? Asked the sheriff. What? Asked the stash. Other people. Bartender paused for a moment, drinking in that thought. Maybe that crotchety old Frenchman was right, said the ring-cop. The door tinkled, opening again. Everyone turned. Jason Manning, the town drunk, staggered in, scratching at a fresh bandage on his arm. He hadn't showered in days, and you could smell yesterday's alcohol sweating out through his skin. The sheriff sipped his drink and nodded at him. Need a seat? The sheriff asked. No, I'll take a table, said Jason. You been drinking? Is that some kind of joke? You think I'm joking? I don't want to assume. Have you been drinking? Asked the sheriff again. What do you think? Answered the drunk. Could you use another? What kind of question is that? A polite one. Then yes, of course I could use a drink. Set this man up, said the sheriff. The bartender looked out the window into the darkened street. Sure? He deserves it, and I got a good feeling about tonight. Good feeling, or no bad feelings? I'm optimistic. Alright, said the bartender, but I'm pouring him slow. You do that. The sheriff swallowed his drink in a single gulp, stood up and secured his hat squarely on his head. It was all business again. Alright, I'll be at the station if anybody needs me. Wilton sat outside the bar in his truck, smoking a cigarette with the window down, watching the stars slowly poke through the black. Static screamed at him over his police radio, garbled, gibberish, angry and disaffected, even if only for a second. He picked up the handset. Go for Jacobs. Nothing. Dad? Is that you? He asked. Deputy Milo Manning manned the desk at the silent station house. While he'd never been the brightest or the best of the old guard, he was the only remaining deputy the force had left, making a bold now. He meant well, and the fact that he still manned his post day or night, day in, day out, without a real day off, meant the world to Wilton, and Wilton meant the world to Milo. The phone on his desk was thick, black, and heavy. It was an old phone, ancient really, the kind of the phone company used to rent to you before they would let you buy your own. The receiver having enough heft to club a man unconscious. When it rang, it had a deep, wounding clang that tapered off into a chiming whimper at the end. Milo rarely let it get to a second ring. Tonight, it was ringing off the hook. Sheriff Station, Deputy Manning. The line crackled and popped like a fireplace, an almost imperceptible whisper clawing at the light static of the line. Hello? No answer. Milo hung up. Wilton walked in, hung his hat on the limping three-toed hat rack. Milo? Sheriff? Any calls? It's the usual this time of night. Awful lot, though. Wilton sighed. Well, the radio's quiet. Let's hope it's just the phone tonight. The phone rang again. Milo snatched it immediately out of its cradle. Sheriff Station, Deputy Manning. Static wobbled a bit, oscillating between the pops and crackles. Hello? Milo set the phone back down into the cradle. How's everybody doing tonight? He asked. Well, said Wilton, your brother's a bit drunk already. He hadn't been sleeping, not since last week. I heard. What's his temperament been like? Cranky. Somebody said something to him last week that stuck with him. See him pacing around the yard, waving his fist in the air. Is it? No, it's just the thing he does when he's arguing with himself. Kind of tells whoever he's pissed at all the things he wishes to tell him so he doesn't actually have to tell them, you know. Yeah, said Wilton. I figure I do. The station radio crackled, squealing along a wicked note that sounded like a scream passed through 2 tin cans and a piece of string. Wilton and Milo looked up at the newly antique radio setup and then back at each other. They threw their fists down in quick succession. 1, 2, 3. On the third beat, Wilton stuck out 2 fingers. Milo stuck out 3. Odd. Milo hung his head and sighed before standing, resigned, and walked over to the radio. He pushed down the call button. Sheriff Station, Deputy Manning. The static thrummed for a moment, crackles, pops, a tiny whistle squelch. Manning! Screamed the angry, garbled static. Yes, said Milo. This is Deputy Manning. Just kept caught in the corner behind the bar for the nights that Jason tied on one too quick. The night Jason was just tired and a drink had finally coaxed him into a pleasant drowsiness. On the upside, no one had to deal with Jason's dour fucking grumble. On the downside, they had to listen to him. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he said weird shit. But sometimes he just sang. And that was the thing he did that set everyone's teeth on edge. Jason mumbled from his cot, alcohol practically steaming off his breath, his eyes still closed tight. Everyone in the bar looked up at once. He continued his slurring speech in his sleep, singing a song tunelessly. What the hell is that? Asked the bartender. Wu-Tang, maybe? Offered the Stash. It ain't Wu-Tang, said the mullet. I said maybe, said Stash. Anytime he says something that sounds like black man, you always go to Wu-Tang. And sometimes I'm right. It's Outcast, said the rent-a-cop from the back of the bar. Bombs over Baghdad. What year was that? Asked the bartender. '01 or '02, said the rent-a-cop. Can't remember which. The Stash pulled out his phone, Googling the song. December '01, he looked up. Who'd we lose back in '01? Geraldine's boy, said the bartender. But that was before December. Be at least '02, said the mullet. No one died in December. The bartender nodded. Robbie Witherspoon had his accident down at the mill. That was spring of '02, wasn't it? Yeah, said the Stash. Miss Gillespie had her heart attack. She was 64, said the mullet. I know that. You know many 64-year-old Outcast fans. We're just listing names. That's not what we're doing and you know it. Oh shit, said the bartender. The Wilkins kid had that car wreck in the fall after the football game. Oh yeah, said Stash, the mullet and the rent-a-cop all at once. Probably the kid, said the mullet. I like that kid, said the rent-a-cop. This is bad, isn't it? Asked the Stash. Not always bad, said the bartender. But it's sometimes bad. Yeah, but not always. What do you reckon we should do? Asked the mullet. Let him sleep, said the bartender. Maybe it's nothing. But maybe it's something, said the Stash. Bartender nodded, plucking another glass from the depths of the dishwasher in the sink, and stabbed his ratty white rag into it. If it is, we'll know soon enough, won't we? Ain't nothing to be done until we get a call. Dell stared at the large black phone in the corner, wondering if at any moment it might scream with that terrible, ceremonious ring it had. Jason stirred awake with a snort, chased from his sleep by terrifying dreams. The dreams were getting worse these days. Guilt, even guilt he did deserve to take upon himself, prying open his eyelids every time he lay down. He looked around at everyone staring at him. What the hell are you assholes looking at? They looked at each other. The hell did I say this time? We were singing again, said the Stash. Shit. Jared and Allison Gorski's trailer was the closest thing the Pine Hall Bluff still had to a butcher. If it was meat and it was in town, either it was frozen and brought in by truck or it was hunted and trapped by the group. Either way, they sold it at the crossroads of the highway and the now closed road to the mine. You generally never saw them out after nightfall, but sometimes, when they got caught up chasing game or it took longer to clear the traps than they thought it might, they'd find themselves in the wood after sunset, hauling ass home toward stars wheeled all the way into view. This night, however, they got caught out far later than most. Animals had sprung lots of traps that day, and if they'd left them out there too long, bobcats and foxes would set in upon them and steal harder and kill. Herod had wanted to give up whatever was left in the woods the minute the sun slipped behind the tree line, but Allison wasn't going to miss out on a cent. Times were getting harder, paychecks thinner, and no one was ever going to buy their house. She wanted to leave, wanted nothing more of these woods, so she let greed get the best of her. And then night fell. Herod was nervous as they approached the trap. Wildlife had already ceased chirping, croaking, or clicking, and the hard chill had begun to set in, mist wafting slowly over sweating earth. His boots crunched through dead leaves, sunk into soft earth. A small bit of fog blew over the trap, revealing the chain, snap, and a single fox leg gnawed off at the hip. God damn it, whispered Herod, slowly unslinging the rifle from his back. Allie, we got another one. There's no answer. Allie? He turned around, his wife 20 feet behind him, frozen in place, her eyes burning a hole through him. She quickly cast her gaze over to the side, and he saw it as well. A three-legged fox, growling, eyes blazing unnaturally, ready to pounce. Herod hefted his gun. Whatever you do, said Allison through gritted teeth, don't kill it. Herod nodded silently, leveling the rifle. The fox stood motionless, waiting for either of them to move, the wound on his hip oozing and raw. Herod's finger hovered over the trigger. The fox darted, leaping at Allison. Herod fired. The fox's head exploded, its limp, headless body tumbling into the brush. No! Screamed Allison before stopping, frozen, arm extended, her eyes beginning to glow unnaturally. She turned and looked at Herod, mouth curled in a snarl, eyes brewing with hate. No, 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 muttered Herod, backing away slowly. No, baby, no! Allison held her arms out wide, her body levitating 6 inches off the ground, her head thrust back. She shrieked in angry horror, filling the woods with a cry like an animal being slowly slaughtered. The trees shivered and the ground trembled, and the whole of the night seemed to flee with her. Herod ran. There was no way he was shooting his wife, not unless he had to. So he ran up the steep hill blindly behind the woods, praying silently that the wife wasn't following close behind. The large black phone rang. Sheriff's Station, Deputy Manning. Milo cast a stern look over the sheriff. Yeah? Paused. I'll let him know. Thanks. He rested the phone back in his cradle. What is it? Said Wilton. Miss Chambers. Says there's fog. Fog? Or fog? Fog. How high? About 8 feet, I reckon. Said it was touching the awning of her house. Well, it's about 8 feet, muttered a few swears under his breath. Won't worry too much, Sheriff. Could still be a quiet night. Phone rang again. Wilton gave Milo a withering glare as if he'd somehow jinxed them both. Probably just one of them, said Milo, picking up the handset. Sheriff's Station, Deputy Manning. There was a long, drawn-out silence as Milo simply nodded, expression darkening. Right, well, lock yourself indoors, don't go near the windows, and we'll be up as soon as we can. Wilton was already buckling on his holster when Milo hung up. Who is it? Allison Gorski. She got off and run into the woods. Is it? Milo stood up, putting a well-worn, stained department jacket from the back of his rickety chair. Yeah, looks like it. Says it started as a fox, but now it's got Miss Gorski. Damn it, cursed Wilton. How many damn times have I told those assholes to clean their traps before sunset? 7, at least while I was around. Wilton glared again. I was being rhetorical. Sorry, boss. Just get the ammo, I'll make the call. Picked up the handset, and here I had a good feeling about tonight. Milo turned to walk to the armory, then stopped, turning back around. Can I be honest with you? Asked Milo. Yeah, I hate your good feelings. You're not always wrong, said Wilton in almost a wilting whimper. Milo gave a shake of the head, sort of nodding without fully committing. Just get the goddamn ammo. Jason sipped at 2 fingers of Buffalo Trace from the thick-bottomed glass as he stared mindlessly at his reflection in the dark gas station window. Whispers and melodies began to creep in through the back of his mind. While he'd sobered up a little during his nap, he was still a little hazy, nursing a buzz that was a little more work than bringing back up to speed. He thought about throwing back the glass in a single swallow, slamming it down on the bar top, and wildly ordering another, but it was still early yet. Getting good and proper hammered probably wouldn't be the best idea. But he wanted to. He really, really wanted to. And then the phone rang. Everyone else looked up, staring at it ominously. But not Jason. Jason took another sip and set the glass down on the counter. The phone was large, old, heavy, and black. Its plastic scuffed, chipped in places, exactly like the model at the police station. But its ring was even deeper, more sonorous, lasted a little longer, as if the clangor was pissed off at the world and wanted to wake it, screaming with each strike of the bell. Everyone knew what it meant. After all, it only ever rang for one reason. Jess picked up the phone. Murphy's, he said, just in case. Yup. Then he hung up the phone, walked over to Jason, and gently pushed his whiskey out from in front of him. Jason looked up, eyes bitter. I was drinking, Matt. I reckon you were, said Jess. I'll make you some coffee. What is it? Asked the stash. Anyone in trouble? Asked the mullet. There's always someone in trouble, said Rennicott. We don't call Jason for any other reason. Man can hope, said the stash. Not in Pine Hall Bluff, he can't. Hope died down in that mine with all the rest of them. Padre, called Wilton into the candlelit dark from the doorway at the church. He stood there, hat in hand, refusing once more to step in any further. Priest shrunk out from his darkened rectory, shirt untucked, clerical collar undone and splayed out at the neck like a bone sticking out of his throat. His eyes were weary, full of dread at the sight of the sheriff. He shook his head, broken. What happened to that good feeling of yours? It was only a feeling. I'm told they're not so reliable. Well, how much longer do you think we can keep this up? As long as we have to, and as long as we can, whichever comes first. I can't do it. Not tonight, not again. You can do it. I'm tired, Wilt. I know you gotta stick around and play sheriff for whatever reasons. I'm not playing anything, said Wilton sternly, his eyes squinting at his patented glare. Well, you were never elected. You inherited the job and nobody questioned it because everyone else left. Being the last man standing is admirable and all, but there comes a time when you have to admit this isn't your fight. Padre? For the love of God, stop with the Padre. My name is Jeremy. A man of the cloth, Padre. For the time being, well, I ain't calling you Jeremy. I'm a man, not a job. No one in Pine Hill Bluff is anything but their job anymore. That's kind of the point of this place. It's what we've become. Father Paddock walked forward, nodding gently, and sat down in a pew. You know, he said, holding up his two-fingered hand, they call us fishers of men. But when people say that, they think of the disciples in rowboats casting nets out into the crystal clear, still water on a warm, sunny day. They don't think of it as a small boat in the North Atlantic, being tossed around like a fucking toy. The men inside it being battered and bruised, terrified that the next wave was going to swallow them whole and cast them down in the frozen grave no one will ever find. They don't think about the man who loses half a hand to a stray fishing line, or that his shipmates are so used to such things that they react to it instinctively and expect you to finish up your shift after they stitch you up. They don't think of the men shivering, icicles streaming out of their beards, desperate for just one night in a warm bed being held by someone who cares about them. No, they think it's all about that fucking rowboat on that still fucking waters in the middle of the fucking Mediterranean. They think about being a priest comes with all the answers. They were not men anymore. They were not normal. Thus, we wear an armor of God against the day-to-day awfulness that tries to kill our spirit. He folds his hand in the lap, staring up at Wilt. I'm just a man, Wilt. There's no armor left. No magic. Just a man in a boat, scared shitless, waiting for the next wave. Fishers of men, said Wilton. They don't just say that. It's from the book of Matthew, chapter 4, verse 19. Priest looked up, surprised. Yeah, he said, somewhat enthusiastically. You've been reading. There's only so much of this shit you can see before you have to acknowledge that there's something bigger going on. You won't find the answers in there. The book is only questions. Well, I have to try. The priest sat back sighing. So how much longer can we keep that up before we crack, or go the way of those things? One more night, said Wilton. It's always just one more night. That's the only way we'll make it. It's the only way any of us will make it, Joe sighed. Look, there's a woman out there with one of those things in her. She's deep in the woods, probably headed back to the breach. She's dangerous, she's alone, and she needs our help. It takes at least 3 men to save her, the body, the gun, and the holy man. Now the big man might not be right with you at the moment, but you sure as shit are right with him. He still hears your prayers, he still throws those things back where they belong. So I'm only gonna ask one more time. Are you gonna get your goddamn cross and kit or not? The priest nodded. Yeah, I reckon I'll get my kit. The high beams of the police cruiser cut through the night, pancaking in a sea of white against the dense tree line. Fog trickled along the ground, slowly rising, climbing. Soon the entire mountain would be swallowed whole, and the things that walked the earth with it would roam, shrieking, howling, looking for something to drag back to them. Jason and Milo stood along the side of the road and at the top of the hill, staring down into the deep, dark woods beyond the light and the fog. You sober yet? Milo asked of his brother. No, said Jason. You sober enough? I'm hearing things, if that's what you mean. Not much, but I'm starting to hear them. You let me know if I need a drink, he said, fiddling with the bandage on his arm. You'll get everything you want once that sun comes up and that fog burns off. I'll even fill a bottle with you if you like. I need one now. Don't be an ass, said Milo. Don't pretend you know the drill. You aren't going to impress anyone with that hard-ass routine. Not being a hard-ass, said Jason. No, you're not. You're pretending to be a hard-ass, so quit it. Jason turned to look at Milo. I'm scared. So am I, said Milo. I hate this. So do I. The two stared in the night for a moment, Jason taking repeated nervous puffs from a cigarette while doing a sort of junky shuffle along the side of the road. He looked like he needed a fix, but his stomach was doing a dance against his bladder, and he just wanted to ball up a fist and pound the living shit out of him. Milo tried to distract him. What do you think Dad would make of all this? He asked. You want me to ask him? Milo shot his brother a shocked glance. You've seen? Of course I've fucking seen him, asshole. The person who died in this town that I haven't seen floating across the fog or worse, screaming down in the breach. How is he? I mean, how does he? He's like the rest of them. Dead, pissed off, tortured. I'm sorry, said Milo. I didn't mean... They aren't people anymore, Milo. Remember that. The shades. Shadows of who they were. All that's just left of them is their anger, their fear, their hunger. They're just fragments broken off from the whole. Everything else that was died with them, it's all gone, stripped away, melted off into some ethereal slag. And they're in agony, feeling nothing but pain and fear and hate. All they want is to take it out on the living, find a way back into this world and get back whatever it is they lost of themselves. Yeah, Milo, I've seen Dad, and if you saw what he looks like now, you'd piss yourself. He ain't our dad anymore. In fact, he's nothing like us at all. All that bad stuff, that's all that gets left of it. Maybe we'll have to leave all that stuff behind and move on. Maybe that's just all the stuff you can't take with you to heaven. Jason gave his brother a deeply bitter look. And maybe all that stuff is really all that there was to begin with. Headlights lit up the road as the sheriff's truck called around the sharp turn. Jason looked out at the swelling fog. He could hear the whispers of the dam creeping up the hill with it. Whimpers, cries, growls, screams. He could feel the pain coming, smell the rot on the wind. There was a breach in the walls of the world out there, swarming with the angry dead who all looked across the divide with jealousy and unquenchable rage. They hated the living world because they missed it, and in death felt nothing but longing and pain. There was an afterlife, and it was misery. Nothing but sheer, undeniable misery. And it wanted revenge, not for some past wrong, but for everything that came after it. Jason's stomach tightened. No one else realized it yet, but tonight wasn't like most other nights. This wasn't just a search and rescue followed by another sullen shiver of the breach. This was a storm. This was the afterlife coming out swinging. For the first time in a long time, Jason was genuinely worried that they weren't all going to come back. In fact, he wasn't sure any of them were coming back at all. Fulton stepped out of his truck, pinched the cherry off a cigarette, and flung the butt out into the brush. Sober? He asked Milo. Sober enough, said his deputy. He tell you that? No, he's getting good and pissy, and it's approaching downright mean. He's good. Jason saw his brother a wicked stare. Don't play your brother's keeper's games with me, asshole. Told you. The sheriff slid a box of shells out of his pocket, pulling a fistful out and presenting to Father Padre. Padre, you mind blessing the ammo? He asked. I've already blessed these. Yeah, but you blessed it all last time, and that was about a week ago, so blessings don't wear off, Wilt, said the priest through a nasty bit of side-eye. Just say the damn words, Padre. I'd feel an awful lot better about all this if you would. The sheriff held out a handful of bullets, each of them with a cross carved onto the front. Father Paddock pulled an ornate aspergillum out of his pocket and sprinkled the shells with a spritz of holy water, waving his two-fingered hand above them, speaking a mouthful of Latin before mumbling out, In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. He looked Wilton square in the eye. Now try not to kill anyone with those. That's the idea, Padre. That's the idea. Time and space are different in the fog. They don't just mesh anymore. It rolls in and the night can last for days, or an hour. The trees can seem both closer together and farther apart at the same time. Corners of your vision warp and bend like a trick lens on a camera. You can hear your own footsteps and you can hear someone talking to you, but you can't hear much of anything else. Not a bird, not an insect, not a rustling of leaves in the wind. Sometimes in the distance you can hear the dead screaming, but that's about it. And you'd best not wander off alone in it. Those that do rarely find their way back or are ever seen again. The rules of the fog are simple. Tight groups, always stay in tight groups. Always keep someone else in your line of sight. Always keep your voice low. Never panic. Never run. Just keep moving forward. And if you see one, never, ever let it touch you. They can be anywhere, possessing an animal, possessing a person, fiddling with a door or window so it bangs angrily over and over again. Sometimes they wander aimlessly, other times they're aggressive with purpose, like they can think, like they have a plan, like they are more than just a disembodied desperate to feel what it is to be alive again. Elsewhere, the wall of fog crawled over houses, trickled down hillsides, swallowed most abandoned neighborhoods. Houses shook at their foundations, windows clattering open and shut, mirrors fogged up, faces pressing against the glass from the other side, staring out at the world. Trees came to life, flailing at the dark, street lamps flickering on and off, lawnmowers wheeled around yards, engines buzzing, blades tearing to pieces anything they could find. Pools of water rippled from footsteps skittering across the surface. Shadows crept just outside the light, dancing madly in the mist. And under beds or in closets or behind couches hid the last few remaining townfolk of Pine Hall Bluffs, each and every one of them asking themselves why they hadn't just left, wondering whether they would make it through until morning. It was pea soup as far as 20 feet out as the four men walked through the woods, flashlights lighting up the whole night, and each facing another as the both looked behind the person and keep them in sight. Milo also clutched a rifle, Wilton a .38, and Father Paddock a cross. Jason didn't carry anything, he simply balled his hands in a fist, not to fight, but to release stress bubbling up in his gut. He could hear the voices, the chittering, the singing, the rambling, all just out of earshot. But there was only one voice that shrieked the loudest, and he could hear that one clear as a bell. There's no telling how long they walked, even watches and phones lied. But Jason pointed them straight through, and they pressed on, never dawdling, never letting themselves get distracted by distant madness. They knew well the woman they were hunting, and they no doubt knew the name of the thing that was inside her, at least the name it had when they knew it. But it was best not to think about that. Sometimes they figured out who it was that they were up against, other times their attempts to stay ignorant were rewarded. All of them had seen friends out here before. None of them liked to see what they'd become. Death was a far crueler thing than they'd ever imagined. They would weep for their friends, and then they'd weep for themselves. Jason heard a dozen different songs out here, the lyrics on repeat, the melodies fractured, the tunes all off-key. He heard one spirit drawing close, rambling the words to bombs over Baghdad, and a chill ran up his spine. His mind putting together the terrible things the spirit had shown him in his sleep. He didn't want to think about it. He shoved all that awfulness to the back of his brain, where he kept the hours and hours of bad dreams that didn't belong to him, and he just pressed forward, dreaming of the tall glass of whiskey waiting for him at the end of the night. The whiskey would do its work. The whiskey would chase the voices away. The whiskey would make everything quiet again. The whiskey would buy him peace until the next time the fog came, until the next time they had to sew the world shut. The whiskey, the whiskey, the whiskey. He watched as several spirits pass, recognized their faces, their voices. He didn't want to remember them, not like this. And then he'd heard two voices at once coming from the same place. Miss Gorski howling hysterically into the night while the spirit of some poor soul chanted and gibbered and hooted deep inside her, working her like a marionette with strings all on the inside. There, he said quietly, pointing into the dense fog. Everyone cast their flashlights ahead of them, beams lighting up the white wall of fog. And there she was, her shadow dancing 50 feet away, through beams cutting toward them at a frightening clip. The way she moved was unnatural, like her limbs were all on backward, being worked by levers and pulleys. Milo, said Wilton softly, you know what to do. Milo nodded, swallowed hard as he raised the rifle to his eye, bracing the butt on his shoulder. He had to be careful. He couldn't hit anything vital. At this distance, he couldn't exactly be sure where she was. He needed her to clear the fog, get close enough to see her for real. Of all the things he had to do, this was the part that made him the most nervous. There was a real person out there. If he missed, he'd be the one that killed her, not the thing inside her. Jason reached under her shirt and pulled out 2 iron chains that were fixed to a girdle under his clothing. A modified straitjacket without the arms, handing a chain to each Wilton and Father Paddock. The men took the chains, nodding silently, everyone waiting for Milo to fire his first shot. Jason closed his eyes, thinking, I'm over here, come to me, find me, I'm over here. He held his breath. He knew that the moment he thought aloud, every spirit within miles would be racing to take his body for a spin. He was sensitive. And with sensitives, you live again, you can feel again, you can do more than just scream and flail and look at the world through eyes again. You can speak again and tell the world why you hated it and what you wanted to do to it. Alice and Gorski barreled towards them through the fog like a charging rhino. Milo held his breath to steady his shot. Wilton and Father Paddock held tight their ends of the iron chains. The rifle jumped in Milo's hands, the blessed bullet tearing a mound of flesh off the top of Allison's shoulder. Allison Gorski shrieked as the thing leapt out of her, dropping her body limp on the ground. He rose up in the air, a luminous shade, wailing in agony, screaming towards Jason, claws out extending from its elongated fingers, desperate for his body. It was a negative of a man, all the colors backward, almost indiscernible, but clearly dressed head to toe in mining. These were the worst, the angriest, the ones whose death tore open the veil between the living and the dead. All that was left of them was a hatred for what had happened to them, the pain and the loneliness of those who had lain broken and buried for days under that rock and rubble. Father Paddock held up his cross, praying under his breath, trying to keep the thing from Milo and Wilton. Milo dropped the rifle and leapt for Jason, grabbing the third and final chain resting beneath his shirt. The thing entered Jason and his eyes went black. He writhed against the chains, lurched into the air, floated a foot above the ground. Milo, Wilton, and Father Paddock all heaved in unison, wrenching him back down towards the ground. He screamed like he was being flayed alive. Allison sat upright with a shot stricken with terror. "What the—" "You were taken, Miss Gorski," said Milo. "Get home now," said Wilton, his voice deep with bass. "Run. Don't stop for anything, and if you see anything moving, just keep running." "Just keep running," she said. "Just keep running." She jumped to her feet and took off in a full sprint, the adrenaline pumping her legs much faster than she ever imagined they could go. Within seconds, she vanished up the hill into the fog. "The power of Christ compels you," said Father Paddock, clutching his cross in his two-fingered hand, and the chain gripped tightly in the other. "Fuck Christ!" Jason bellowed in a voice that sounded like it was speaking backward. The words were all in the right order, but they all sounded wrong. They were stretched out, clipped in the wrong places. "I call upon God the Almighty to calm this beast. Soothe it in its—" "God? There is no God! Only pain, only death. Those are Satan's words, not yours. There is no Satan, only lies, only stories for children, only this!" Jason yanked at the chains, trying to free himself, but each man held fast, slowly walking him down the hill. "What? Stop it! Let me go!" "The Lord is waiting for you on the other side," said the priest. "You were always full of shit, Paddock. You never believed. You were right not to. It's the only thing you were ever right about." Wilton cast a wary eye at Father Paddock. "Padre, don't listen to it. This isn't my first rodeo, Wilt. I know, I'm just walk us down that hill. I really don't like this fucker, whoever he is, or was. Let me go, let me go, let me go." And with that, the whole forest came alive, tree branches clawing at the men, earth quivering beneath them, the fog whipping around them in dual gusts of bitterly cold wind. "What the hell is going on here?" asked Wilton. "It's not this thing," said Father Paddock. "How can you be so sure? I've never seen one do anything like this." "One? No. A couple dozen? Yes." They all looked at Jason. "He called too many," muttered Father Paddock. "There were too many out," said Wilton. "Why didn't he tell us there were this many out here?" Milo tugged on the chain against the fighting spirit. "All due respect, Sheriff, but I fucking hate your good feelings." "Duly noted, Deputy." There were so many spirits in the forest that wanted life, and yet they couldn't stand to get close to the priest. His light burned, though you couldn't see it on this side of the world. On the flip side, the dark side, the dead side of the world, he was a blinding beacon that signaled the essence of the souls away. So they took the next best living things, the trees. The whole forest screamed at once, limbs almost snapping off trees as they grasped at the men. Each one was growing ever more battered and bruised as they inched their way down the hill towards the mine. Yet each held on to their chain for dear life, knowing that if one of them let his slip, they might all be doomed. Father Paddock continued to pray under his breath. Milo swore silently to himself, and Wilton just held on, giving the thing in Jason a look that said, "I will not let you go." The whole night was angry now, yelling, kicking, and screaming, a storm of animus rolling to a froth. It just had to hold on a little longer. A large branch swung down at Milo, missing him, but connecting with the chain, knocking it clean out of his grip. Milo lunged to pick it up, but the tree swung back, slamming into his chest, knocking him 20 feet back. Milo! Shouted Wilton, making sure he kept his grip. He and Father Paddock immediately redoubled their efforts to keep the chain steady. Already the thing was trying to wriggle away as Milo stumbled to his feet, rubbing his sore chest. Another branch swung at Milo, but this time he ducked before stepping out of the way of its backswing. Milo sprinted back to grab the chain, positioning himself out of reach of any other trees. He picked it up, pulled it taut, and nodded at everyone else. Wilton looked down the hill, branches swinging to and fro, the entire forest a chaotic din of creaking wood and snapping branches. There are too many trees down that way, he said. This is a forest. There's nothing but trees, said Father Paddock. Yeah, said Milo, pointing across the hillside, but there's fewer if we go that way and around. Father Paddock looked down that way. You mean down by the road? Yeah. Well, that's going to double the time, isn't it? Yeah. Shit. Yeah. Milo and Father Paddock looked over at the sheriff, who nodded begrudgingly. Then the three began tugging Jason and the raging thing with him the long way round, making sure not to step within 20 feet of anything living, moving or no. Time is funny in the fog. If you asked any of these men how long it took to get down the mine, each would give you a different answer. For one, it was an instant, another all night. There's no telling how long it took or how far they dragged Jason's body through the countryside. But the trees were behind them now, the outraged forest a quarter mile at their back. After the collapse, they tore a hole in the universe and shot the dead out on the land. The mine was shut up, chains were laid across all the roads, and the equipment was moved away. But Wilton and his men had come back in and set it all right again, moved all the roadblocks, clearing a path through the work site for the nights when they had actually exactly what they were about to do. Each man knew this place like the back of his hand. Even now, in the pitch black, luminous fog-choked night, they knew their way, inching step by step towards the main shaft. It was a run-down thing, plywood and corrugated metal, consolidating all the wires into one place. The men gripped tight their chains, wheeling around so Wilton could switch on the power. The sheriff flipped the switch on the junction box, and the whole work site lit up like a circus. Strings of lights, many of the bulbs shattered or burned out, blazed to life, and the generator started chugging like an engine of a tractor trailer. The entrance to the mine shaft glowed like a beaconing street lamp on a pitch-black street, two strings of lights leading in from opposite sides. The three men walked steadily toward it, dragging Jason along by his chain. No, no, it wailed. Not back in! Not back in! The thing within Jason snarled and snapped, eyes wide and unblinking. Each man kept up his end of the chain. They'd done this more times than they'd like to count, and this was by far one of the angriest spirits. He grabbed the chain Wilton held, but Wilton didn't budge. He tried to levitate off the ground again, held high to the heavens. But let out unearthly hell, but the man just yanked it back down. Not the pit! Not back in the pit! It screamed. But they were unfazed. The men knew that hell wasn't down that shaft. They didn't believe in hell anymore. What was down there was worse. They'd seen it before, faced it before, closed it before, but not a bit of that made them any less scared. There was so much pain down there, so much despair. It was palpable. It pulsed and spat and became physical. Most of the time, only Jason could see or hear or feel these things, but down there, anyone could. No, it wasn't hell, but it might as well have been. They dragged Jason onto the massive elevator, once meant to take dozens of miners down at a time, holding the thing dead center. Wilton grabbed the control box with one hand and pressed the large green button. The elevator stuttered to life, descending slowly, groaning, whining, and clanking its way towards the bottom. I'll kill him, yelled the thing inside of Jason, and then I'll take each of you one by one, started punching himself in the face. The power of Christ compels you to stop, shouted Father Paddock. The thing writhed inside Jason, losing its grip on him. No! Wilton counted silently to himself. Just a few more seconds, just a few more seconds. Even the air down here was offended by the living. They didn't want them there. It was oppressive, choking, spiteful. The sounds of tortured souls drifting up from the depths of the mine. The whole place was alive with the dead. It knew what was coming. Everyone knew what was coming. The elevator jerked to a stop with a raucous clangor, and the men all lurched together at once, dragging the thing down deep into the dugout passage. It grew colder and colder as the deeper they went, unnaturally cold, the sweat on their brows freezing in place, rapidly dusting their faces with frost. Last chance, shouted whatever was in Jason. Last chance! You don't have to do this part. We can do this part just fine, said Wilton. I don't think you can. You're weak. Weak! Can't do it. Yeah, though I walk through though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, again Father Paddock. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, repeated Wilton and Milo. It will feel no evil, continued the priest, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I will feel no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The two repeated in unison. Jason quivered, writhing against the chains harder than before. Just keep repeating the prayer, said Father Paddock. We'll get through the... And then came the worst part. Down here, close to the breach, the spirits are far more powerful. Down here, the darkness choked the light. They were better able to endure the harshness of the priest's aura on the other side of everything, and here they were able to try to possess the men, to inflict upon them the very worst memories they made up these spirits, the things that made them truly, deeply, profoundly angry at the world. Father Paddock gripped tight the chain, and the entire world slipped away. Feather bleeding out, the fog melted. Trapped. Weight crushing his back, arm pinched off, turning black. Hungry. So hungry. And thirsty. Parched throat cracking, stomach convulsing, alone, so alone. No one returning shouts anymore. The stench of death coming through the rocks. Father Paddock tried to move beneath several hundred tons of rock and soil, but he couldn't budge. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he repeated, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Wilton stood before his father's belt in his hand. Is that the belt you choose? Asked his father. Yes, sir, he replied. Why did he say that? That's not the belt he chose. This wasn't his father. This was Old Man McCreary, the younger. That boy wasn't a kid. It was Professor McCreary. That wasn't Wilton's memory at all. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he repeated. Old Man McCreary took the belt, and Wilton bent over, pulling down his pants. This will teach you to stay out of my living cabinet, said Older McCreary. This isn't mine, repeated Wilton, and the thick black leather strap beat his bare ass. This isn't mine, this isn't mine, this isn't... I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Milo stood in the center of the house, the wind howling outside, a loose shutter banging. He took a few steps forward to a cabinet, unlocking it, pulling out a rifle. He recognized the rifle. He'd seen it before, handled it before. The weight of it felt familiar. Then he walked slowly towards the first floor bedroom, silently turning the doorknob. Why was this house so familiar? Why did it... Oh, no. He walked through the room, two little boys sleeping on separate beds. No, no, no! He raised the rifle. Bang, bang, bang! 3 shots and the 2 children were gone. Mommy! Yelled a girl. Mommy! What was that? He could hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet running across the creaky wooden floor. Mommy? He turned and fired the rifle again. No, no, no! He'd been here before, was the first on the scene. He knew what this all looked like from the other side of it, knew what happened next. Milo did not want to see this part. He crept slowly across the floor, passing the tiny little clump of bloody bedclothes, and sat down in a chair at the center of the room. He was Mrs. Marzalak. This was 1 week after the mine, after her husband hadn't come back, after the possessed in town ran amok, taking as many of the living back with them as they could. She could live without Adam, couldn't bear to have her children endure another night in which nightmares walked the earth, couldn't bear living in the city where the hell kept vomiting up the dead, so she did something about it. He could taste the metal in his mouth, feel the smooth wood of the gun as his hand slipped across it to the trigger. No, 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 I can't, I just can't, don't pull it. The men snapped out of it. They had reached the end of the excavation, the furthest point from which any of the survivors had dug up. Had the company dug any further, the whole mine would have come down on them. So, beyond the rubble-strewn wall ahead was the resting place of 184 men and women, none of whom would ever see the surface again. And in front of it was a swirling, indescribable mass of clawed hands tearing at the seams of reality, climbing over one another, trying to desperately push out through a pinprick in the fabric of space. The air vibrated, thrumming with malevolence, hundreds of terrified voices howling obscenity. Milo dropped the chain. Father Paddock and Wilton snapped out of it, chasing the ghosts from the inside of their heads. Milo! Shouted Wilton. Pick up the goddamn chain! Milo leaned his head back, held out his arms, and howled as he levitated a foot off the ground. Christ! Yelled Wilton. We can only exercise one at a time, Wilt, shouted Father Paddock over the howling foot of his head. I know! Make the damn call, Wilt. Jason! We start with Jason! Wilt pulled out a hunting knife, its razor-sharp blade, its hilt across, and every inch of it having been submerged in holy water. In the name of the Lord God, yelled Father Paddock over the cacophony of the dead, I command you to leave this body and go back whence you came, closing the door behind you. No! Shrieked the thing, its black eyes crying tears of blood. Wilton slashed at Jason's bandaged arm, cutting a razor-thin gash across it. Fuck you! The thing howled as it rocketed out of Jason's body, cast headlong into the breach. The men both dropped their chains, jumping back from the epicenter in an undulating mass. Father Paddock raised his crossings in the first few syllables of a prayer. Jason reeled, trying to regain his bearings, stumbling away from the mass. Milo! Wilton shouted. Milo looked down and shook his head. I'm not going back. Yes, you are, you bastard! If I go, he goes. That's not the deal, Wilton stated to himself, ready to slash Milo somewhere they could patch up easily enough. But Milo kept shaking his head. I go, he goes. Then Milo stuck his hands into his stomach, pierced the skin, and grabbed hold of his ribcage. I go, he goes. And then the thing yanked with both hands, tearing the ribcage in two. Milo's chest exploding, organs spilling out. Milo hit the ground, dead. Father Paddock rushed forward, sprinkling holy water on the screaming mass with clawed hands and horror. In the name of the Lord God, shut this door! And then the whole world fell silent. The earth no longer quivered, air no longer held an unnatural chill, and the fog was falling and breaking away. The tear in the veil between the living and the dead had been split shut, and what once was 4 men means now only 3, all of whom stared at each other silently, hearts broken. Jesse stood behind the bar, pouring drinks for everyone. A beer for the priest, double vodka soda with lime for the sheriff, and a tall glass of whiskey for the drunk to drown out the voices. The bar was quiet, a pained vigil for the freshly dead. Jason tried not to think about what his brother would look like, what he might sound like the next time he saw him, but he couldn't get it out of his head. The worst part of his brother being gone was that he would never see him again. It was that he would see him constantly, no doubt until the day he died. He drank, and he drank hard and slowly, but surely the voices faded away. Father Paddock was angry, angry at himself, angry at the dead, angry for not leaving, angry at the sheriff for dragging him into this time after time after time. And most of all, he was just angry at God for making the whole damn thing. There had to be a reason for it all, something that made everything he'd seen make sense. He wanted to pray that there were answers, pray for guidance, but deep down, he knew God was listening. Not really. Wilton stared out the window, nursing his drink faster than usual, his thoughts on all those he'd lost. The department was him and him alone now. There were no deputies left. They were gone. All of them. Ones that didn't leave after the first night, he'd gotten killed on nights just like it. He was the law without a force in a town without much left living. He'd become a sheriff to the dead. He could go at any moment, but where would that leave everyone else? The priest glanced up from his beer and looked the sheriff dead in the eye. So is that it? No, said Wilton. That's not it. Not yet. I can't do this anymore. That's what you always say. How much longer until we're all down there? There's just no point. Of course there's a point. What happens when that thing tears open and there's no one here to close it? What happens if it tears open and spills out into the whole world? Someone has to be here. We have to be here. But how many more times can we do this? Asked the priest. 1 more night, said the sheriff. It's always just 1 more night. And there you have it, the chilling conclusion to the town that wasn't anymore. Cargill weaves a masterful tale of haunted history, mining tragedies, and a vengeful ghost that lingered long after the last word. What'd you think of that Sin Eater twist? Hit like if it gave you chills. Subscribe for more ghostly reads on SL tonight, and share your own haunted town stories in the comments. Honestly, the story reminds me a lot of Ambrose Bierce himself. He actually believed somewhat of the same thing, I think, where it was what was left. Like they're not the people that you knew, like they're actually just the leftovers. And then there is another story, I'm trying to remember, but there's another story that's like that as well. Like that's how you shave off, like you have to, you can get into heaven, like once like you go to heaven, and then that's what's left over, and hell is the bad part of you. I can't remember what story it was. Maybe I'll find it and try to read it. But either way, this is Felix Lubezki signing off. Watch your back out there in the dark. Good night.